right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to American Soccer Break. I have Roy, I have Rahi. They proudly are wearing soccer jerseys. Roy's got his US one on, but Rahi, that looks like something else going on there. That's that. I
That is
recognize that.
correct. That is
Yeah.
correct. This is the Croatian jersey. I heard we might be talking about some dual nationals, and this is in honor of the return of one of our most famous dual nationals, Christian Pulisic, coming back from injury, who is actually a Croatian citizen. So he is a dual national. I'm excited that he's back from injury. So that's why I got the Croatian jersey on. I don't think he'd start for Croatia, but that's a different story.
Yeah, we'll get into all that later. Let's kick it off with the women, actually. We'll kick it off with the women here. Interesting development. The U.S. Women and CONCACAF announced that there'll be a Gold Cup now, which will be all the regional teams. So, what are you guys' quick thoughts on that? Do you think this makes sense? Is it going to help them? What's the deal?
Go first, Rocky.
I'm excited on one hand because this is exactly what we talked about, making the sport more competitive. And it's going to be big for some of the other CONCACAF countries. And the other big thing is having a tournament like this in the US, they're going to add CONMEBOL teams as well. So there's going to be 4 CONMEBOL teams that will be added. So imagine the communities here in the US attending this tournament. That'll be really nice. The Paraguayan community, the Colombian, the Brazilian. So they will be, from an attendance standpoint, I can see more excitement being generated. And it'll have a big impact on the competency of those teams. The problem is from making the US team better and growing the sport in popularity. I don't know that this does that. I mean, for example, the Gold Cup on the men's side, I don't know that it's generated more excitement about the sport in the country. So my fear is, I read a headline that said it's an opportunity for the US to win another trophy, which it feels a little like that from a US perspective. They'll be the favorites outright. And so I think it has a positive impact for other countries and making the sport more competitive, but growing the popularity, I'm skeptical.
I think from a U.S. perspective, this is boring. There's nothing exciting about this tournament. It's more exciting on the men's side because the men struggle against pretty much every team they play against. We might blow out Grenada and things like that, but we're shooting for ties sometimes for El Salvador. We're, Mexico, we got our regional rivals, but that doesn't exist on the women's side. There isn't that regional rivalry with Mexico because Mexico doesn't compete with the U.S. So you're missing on the rivalries. You're missing on the competitive matches, which is what's exciting. And you're just not going to get that when the U.S. plays. You'll get it against Canada. But that's pretty much it. Am I missing any other teams? I don't think I am in our region.
Well, Brazil will be in it, but Brazil, we saw them against Brazil already, right?
There's the guest Brazil, sure. But I don't love it from the U.S. perspective. But I will say this is a good thing. We want to grow the women's game. We want to grow it from a regional perspective. This will only benefit the game as a whole. Because right now, teams like in the Caribbean, teams in Central America, many teams in South America, they don't have many opportunities to play matches in a high exposure tournament. So this is going to grow those teams. It's going to make the women's game more competitive, more exciting. It's going to grow the leagues. And I think overall it's a good thing, but don't expect it to be an exciting tournament from a U.S. perspective.
It's funny because in the men's, when the men get into something like Copa America, I know not so much the Gold Cup, but at least Copa America, we're trying to sort of, improve our level, and that's bringing CONMEBOL teams does that. Right. For the women, a little bit of a different story. So, yeah. All right. Moving on now to the men's side of things, is certain individual seems to have committed for the U.S. men's national team. Now, is it official, guys? I just want to make sure because I've heard a lot of very strong sources say that it is, but I just want to make sure.
I think we're close. I don't think it's officially official, but I think it's
he hasn't come out and said it. That's what makes it not official. But there's enough reporting where it's going to happen, and obviously we have a roster that's coming up for the Nations League in this month, so it's going to happen. He just hasn't said it himself, and the roster's not out.
Okay, so let's assume that the 99.7% becomes 100%. What is your guys' take on this individual committing to the U.S. men's national team?
I love this. I am super excited about this. Are we saying his name? Is there a reason we're not saying his name? I'm going to say his name, Zendejas. So I am very, very excited. Less because I think he's going to come in and be a starter and kill it from the get-go, but more because of what it means from an overall dual national perspective, because there are a ton of dual nationals that are Mexican American. And there's kids growing up in this country who, let's be real, for the most part, dream of playing for Mexico. And rightly so. They get to see the people their parents grew up with. They get to see people they connect with at school. They connect with the soccer teams they play for. And there isn't much representation on the U.S. national team of Mexican Americans. We don't see that. We don't see someone killing it in Liga MX playing for the U.S. And historically, we haven't done a good job of bringing in Mexican Americans. So this is very big. This is a guy who is very respected in Mexico. He is killing it for his team in Mexico. He's a good player. He was probably my favorite player that played, besides Cade Cowell, that played in these friendly matches we saw recently versus Serbia. So I love this move. I love what it could mean for the U.S. moving forward in terms of integrating Latino talent. I love the idea of bringing in a Zendejas to kind of change things up a little bit.
Yeah, and his club is America. I mean, a very, very visible club. I mean, there's probably more fans in the U.S. of Club America than there are of Galaxy, LAFC combined. You know, this
The
this
U.S.
is a
men's national team.
of
That's
the
a
U.S.
massive
national.
team.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very visible player, but I think you're half right, because I don't think it means anything about our ability to have Mexican Americans commit to the U.S. men's national team. I think we're a little lucky in this case. Zendejas played at the youth levels, and then there was that whole technicality where he was ineligible for Mexico and yet played for them at some youth levels. So it's a bit weird. I think we're fortunate he chose the U.S. I don't think it suddenly means we're going to get all the Mexican Americans to commit to the U.S. But what it does do is we have a real visible Latino American now playing, hopefully actively contributing for the national team. And that's important from a visibility standpoint, because we've all played youth soccer in this country. And the big community that's missing as you move up into the senior team from a coaching standpoint, from a player standpoint, is Latino Americans. And anyone that's played soccer in this country knows that they are driving a huge piece of the sport forward. And they're a big part of what soccer is in the U.S. And then suddenly at the senior level, they're not there. And of course, there's lack of support for the U.S. national team. They don't have representation from the biggest soccer loving community in the country.
Yeah, let's talk. So let's talk about that. Let's finish with this topic. I think it's very, very important. Roy, why don't you kick it off?
Yep. So my thoughts on this are, Rocky said I was half right, that this doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get better at recruiting Latino dual nationals. I disagree. I totally disagree. And the reason I disagree is now kids will hopefully, if the U.S. treats this player right, gives them the opportunities, gives them the platform to shine, and he takes advantage of those opportunities. Now, Latino kids, specifically Mexican kids, will have someone they watch in Liga MX, someone who plays for their favorite team, America, killing it for the U.S. men's national team.
And the other piece, I think, to that then is there's a stylistic component. And that does happen when you get these players coming in, but they also have to be there at the coaching level too, right? Because I think one of the coolest things, Roy, I remember we were watching the U.S. England game together, and you had your friends from Argentina were texting you, "Como toca Estados Unidos?" And like that kind of feeling about the U.S., like they're touching the ball, they're playing, they're creative. That's important. That's the way that the Latino community watches soccer. That's what they want to see. They want to see some style, some verve, the olays when you're playing it from one side to the other. So we're missing that. And that was a cool moment, I feel like, talking to you, Roy, that there was some legitimacy from that community, like, they can kind of play a little bit, and
Yeah.
but that has to come too. It's not just players, and that's why I think it has to happen at the coaching level too.
Yeah, I mean,
Agreed.
Roy, as a Latino American, obviously, your family's from Argentina. eh, If I put it to you like this, right, and I'm like, would you rather play for the U.S.? Would you rather play for Argentina? I know what your answer is, but why is that? Why would you play for the U.S. over Argentina? Because that's an important point, I think.
Right now, the reason I would play for the US over Argentina is because I feel for the underdog. I feel for the team that is trying to make a name for themselves. It's trying to come up from being ridiculed for all of eternity, being made fun of, not being taken seriously, seeing as a third-rate, fourth-rate team. So I am drawn to teams like that. I love Argentina. I cried for months. I'm still crying about Argentina winning the World Cup. But I'm drawn to play for a team that would need me. I'm drawn to play for a team that could use my skill set. If I watch the US men's national team and I see there is a need for that technical player, I could be a star for this team. That's what kind of draws me to the US, is being that big fish in a small pond, being the most technical player there, being the one that brings that flair and excitement and that gets a US fan super excited about my playing style, about my people, about my culture.
Let's finish up with what I always ask you guys. What are we watching, Rahi? What's going on? What's going on today or later this week? What are we watching?
I'm watching leg 2 of the CONCACAF Champions League. I think that's important. It'll be interesting to see if we can get a lot of teams into the next round. Austin FC was an absolute embarrassment, but everyone else has done reasonably well. I'm really interested in Philadelphia and LAFC, see how they can progress. And that for me, because it signals, we need to show some dominance on the international stage, on the regional stage, and that's interesting to me.
I'll be very interested to see if Austin could come back and put MLS in a respectable place again. LAFC, again, I love that they're playing Tillman. I'm interested to see Tillman play. That's what I'm watching. Also watching Leeds United.
Thanks everyone for watching. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.